Donald Williams had spent 10 years being invisible. 10 years pushing a vacuum across marble floors, so clean you could see your failures reflected back at you. 10 years nodding at executives who looked through him like he was made of glass. But on this particular Tuesday night, in the private office of Julie Rivera, the CEO of Rivera Global, Donald stopped being invisible, because hanging on her wall, in a $5,000 frame, was a photograph he took himself, of his daughter, Muna. The thing is, Donald never posted that photo online, never shared it with anyone. It was a private moment captured on a cheap disposable camera 3 years ago at the park near their apartment. Muna was 7, staring at a monarch butterfly that had landed on a dandelion. Her hair was a mess. Her eyes were wide with wonder. It was the kind of moment a father keeps locked in his heart, not displayed on the wall of a billionaire's office. So when Donald saw it, his heart didn't just skip a beat. It felt like his chest had forgotten how hearts were supposed to work. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel, and it reminds us that hope and second chances are universal languages. Donald's life operated on a precise schedule. Wake up at 5 a.m., make Muna breakfast, pack her lunch with exactly 3 items because that's all they could afford, drop her at PS 47 by 7:15, take 2 buses to reach Rivera Global by 8:30, work the day shift cleaning conference rooms, go home, help Muna with homework, read her 1 chapter from whatever library book they checked out, lights out by 9 p.m. Repeat. This rhythm had been a survival mechanism ever since his wife, Clara, died 4 years ago. A car accident on the FDR Drive. One moment she was humming along to the radio. The next moment Donald was a widower trying to figure out how to braid a 6-year-old's hair. The geometry of struggle. That's what Donald called it. Every decision calculated down to the cent. A gallon of milk cost $3.49. The express bus saved 12 minutes, but cost an extra $1.75. Muna's winter coat from the thrift store needed to last 2 seasons. These calculations filled Donald's head like a constant equation he could never quite solve. But the one calculation that kept him up at night was Muna's school. See, Muna wasn't just smart. She was different. By age 4, she was reading chapter books. By 6, she was correcting her teacher's math. By 8, the school counselor pulled Donald aside and used words like gifted and accelerated learning and special placement. They recommended the Archer Academy, a specialized school for intellectually advanced children. The tuition was $18,000 a year. Donald made $32,000 as a janitor. The counselor mentioned scholarships, but the application process was brutal. Essays, recommendations, interviews. Donald had filled out the forms with hands that shook from exhaustion, knowing the odds were stacked against them, against people like them. People from zip code 10456, where the schools had metal detectors and the playgrounds had broken swings. Then, 3 months later, a letter arrived. Muna had been accepted, full scholarship. Something called the Phoenix Initiative was covering everything. Donald had cried in the bathroom that night, the only place Muna couldn't hear him. That was 2 years ago. Muna thrived at Archer. She came home talking about robotics and quantum theory, and things Donald couldn't begin to understand. But he listened. He listened like his life depended on it, because in a way, it did. Muna was his proof that the world could be different, that poverty didn't have to be a life sentence. Tonight, Donald was working the executive floor. He usually avoided it because the opulence made him feel like a smudge on a clean window. But Martinez had called in sick, and Donald needed the overtime. $73 extra would cover Muna's upcoming field trip to the Museum of Natural History. The executive suite was on the 42nd floor. Donald stepped off the elevator into a world of cream leather furniture and abstract art that probably cost more than his annual salary. The hallway smelled like expensive coffee and ambition. Julie Rivera's office was at the end of the corridor. Donald had seen her exactly twice in 10 years. Once in the lobby, surrounded by assistants. Once in an elevator, where she'd been on her phone the entire ride, her voice sharp and commanding. She was the kind of woman who made rooms rearrange themselves around her presence. Her office door was slightly ajar. Donald knocked anyway. No response. He pushed it open. The office was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Manhattan skyline. A desk made of reclaim which sat in the center, like a throne. But what caught Donald's attention was the wall to his left. It was exposed brick, deliberately industrial in this temple of modern design. And on that wall were photographs. Dozens of them, all black and white, all of children. Donald moved closer, his vacuum forgotten. The photographs were beautiful, hauntingly so. A boy staring at a chessboard, a girl covered in paint, a teenager bent over a violin. Each image captured something essential, something raw about childhood brilliance. And then Donald saw her. Muna, third row, second frame from the left. His daughter's face, frozen in that moment at the park, staring at the butterfly with an expression of pure wonder. Donald's hand reached out before his brain could stop it. His finger touched the glass. The frame was cold, real. This wasn't a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. This was actually happening. Why is she here? Donald whispered to the empty room. His mind raced through possibilities. Had someone stolen the photo? Was this some kind of sick art installation? Did Julie Rivera have some connection to Muna that Donald didn't know about? The thought hit him like ice water. Was Julie Rivera watching his daughter? Behind him, heels clicked on marble. Donald spun around. Julie Rivera stood in the doorway, perfectly composed in a blood-red suit that probably cost more than Donald's car. Her dark hair was pulled back severely. Her expression was unreadable. "Mr. Williams," she said, her voice calm. "I've been wondering when you'd find your way up here." The vacuum cleaner hummed between them like a reminder of all the distance that separated their worlds. But Donald didn't feel invisible anymore. He felt exposed, violated, and underneath that, terrified. Because powerful people don't know your daughter's face unless they want something. Donald's first instinct was to grab Muna's photo off the wall and run. His second instinct was to call the police. His third instinct, the one that actually made it past his shock, was to demand answers. "How do you have that picture?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. "I never posted it anywhere. I never showed it to anyone except Muna." Julie didn't flinch. She walked past him to her desk, her heels clicking with measured precision. She sat down, folded her hands, and looked at him with eyes that seemed to calculate the weight of his soul. "You're not going to call security?" Donald asked, his confusion mixing with his anger. "Why would I?" Julie's expression remained neutral. "You haven't done anything wrong. In fact, I've been hoping we'd have this conversation for quite some time." "Conversation?" Donald's laugh was bitter. "You have a picture of my 10-year-old daughter on your wall. A picture I took. A picture that was in my apartment. So before we have any conversation, you're going to tell me how the hell you got it." Julie reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder. She placed it on the desk between them, The tab read, Project Phoenix, Williams Muna. Donald's stomach dropped. "Sit down, Mr. Williams," Julie said softly. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. But Donald's legs were already shaking. So he sat. Julie opened the folder. Inside were dozens of documents. School records, test scores, psychological evaluations, and photographs. Not just the one on the wall, but others. Muna at the science fair. Muna at the library. Muna walking home from school. "You've been stalking my daughter." Donald's voice was flat, dead, because that's what happens when a father's worst fear becomes real. "No." Julie's response was immediate. "I've been protecting her." "From what?" "From becoming me." The answer was so unexpected that Donald actually blinked. Julie Rivera, the woman who had built $1 billion tech empire from nothing, who was featured in Forbes and Fortune, who had been named one of the most influential people under 40, thought she needed protection. Julie stood and walked to the wall of photographs. She touched the frame next to Muna's. It showed a young girl, maybe 12, with dark hair and hollow eyes. She was holding a trophy, but her expression was empty. "That's me," Julie said quietly. 32 years ago, I just won the national mathematics competition. I was the youngest person ever to do it. The newspapers call me a genius. The schools call me gifted. But you know what no one called me? Donald shook his head. Federal. Julie turned to face him. And for the first time, Donald saw past the suit and the power. He saw a woman who'd been where Muna was. A woman who understood. "I grew up in the Bronx," Julie continued. "Single mother, 4 siblings. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with bars on the windows. My mother worked 3 jobs just to keep us clothed. I was smart, Mr. Williams. Really smart. But smart doesn't mean anything when you're hungry, when you're wearing shoes with holes in them, when you can't afford the bus fare to get to the gifted program across town." She walked back to her desk, but she didn't sit. She stood there, her hands gripping the edge like she was holding herself upright. "I got a scholarship to a private school, just like Muna. And you know what happened? I didn't fit in. The other kids had tutors and summer programs and parents who understood the system. I had brilliance and poverty, and in America, poverty always wins. By the time I was 16, I dropped out. By 18, I was working at a call center. It took me 15 years to claw my way back. 15 years of night school and connections I had to fight for, and doors I had to kick down." Donald's anger was still there, but it was mixing with something else now. Recognition. "So you're telling me you found Muna because she's like you?" Donald asked. "Not just Muna." Julie gestured to the wall. "All of them. Every child on this wall has the same specific cognitive markers I had. Spatial reasoning, pattern recognition, abstract thinking. These aren't just smart kids, Mr. Williams. These are the 1 in 10,000 kids, the ones who could change the world. But they're all in the wrong zip codes. The Phoenix Initiative," Donald said slowly. "That's you." Julie nodded. "I've spent the last decade building an algorithm. It searches public school records, standardized test results, teacher recommendations. It finds the sparks that the system is designed to extinguish. And then I give them what I never had, a chance." Donald looked at the wall again. 47 photographs. 47 children who looked like they were carrying the weight of impossible potential. "You got that photo from my phone," Donald realized. "When I applied for the scholarship, I had to submit family information. Photos were optional, but I included one. You included 3. Julie corrected. I chose this one because it shows who Muna really is. Not performing. Not trying to please anyone. Just existing in a moment of pure discovery. That's the spark I'm looking for. Donald should have felt relieved. This wasn't a stalker. This wasn't a threat. This was the answer to a prayer he hadn't even known he'd prayed. But something was still wrong. If you're helping her, Donald said carefully, why hide it? Why not just tell me? Julie's expression hardened. Because I've learned that pride is the enemy of progress. If I'd walked up to you 2 years ago and said, Hi, I'm a billionaire and I want to pay for your daughter's education, what would you have said? Donald opened his mouth, closed it, because she was right. He would have said no. He would have seen charity, not opportunity. He would have protected Muna from the very thing that could save her. I didn't want your permission, Mr. Williams. I wanted results. And Muna is thriving. Her teachers say she's the most advanced student they've had in a decade. She's happy. She's growing. She's becoming exactly who she's supposed to be. Without me knowing, Donald said bitterly, would you have let me help if you'd known? The question hung between them like a challenge. Donald thought about his pride, his fear, his desperate need to protect Muna from a world that took more than it gave. No, he admitted, I wouldn't have. Julie sat down finally, her posture relaxing slightly. Then we have a problem, because the scholarship only covers 4 more years. After that, Muna will need to go to college. MIT, Stanford, Caltech, places that cost $70,000 a year. And I can write that check. But I won't. Not if you're going to fight me every step of the way. So what do you want? Donald asked. Julie smiled. It was the first genuine expression he'd seen from her. I want you to stop seeing help as weakness. I want you to understand that poverty isn't a moral test you need to pass. It's a cage, and I'm offering you the key. Before Donald could respond, Julie reached for something else in her drawer. Another folder. This one had Donald's name on it. His heart sank. What else did she know? What other parts of his life had she dissected and cataloged? Julie opened the folder slowly, deliberately, and what Donald saw inside made the entire room tilt. Listen, if you've made it this far in the story, you're invested. You want to know what happens next. But here's the thing. Most people scroll past these stories without subscribing. They watch, they enjoy, and they disappear. If this story matters to you, if you actually care how it ends, hit that subscribe button, please. It takes 2 seconds. And if you don't, you'll probably forget about this channel and never hear any other amazing stories from me. The photograph in the folder was old, faded. The edges were worn like someone had held it too many times. It showed a girl, maybe 13, with dark eyes that looked like they'd already seen the end of the world. She was holding a mathematics trophy, the same trophy Julie had mentioned. But this girl wasn't Julie. At least, not the Julie standing in front of him. This was Julie before. My father left when I was 11, Julie said, her voice different now, smaller, more human. Just walked out one day and never came back. My mother was devastated. She started drinking. Not a lot at first, just enough to take the edge off. But grief is a hungry thing, Mr. Williams. It eats you from the inside until there's nothing left but the shell. She took the photograph from the folder and held it like it might crumble to dust. I won that competition 6 months after he left. I thought it would make her proud, thought it would bring her back to me. But when I came home with the trophy, she was passed out on the couch. Didn't even know I'd been gone. Donald felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't the powerful CEO anymore. This was a girl who'd been abandoned twice. once by her father, once by circumstances. I needed help, Julie continued. I needed someone to see that I was drowning. But people don't see genius in a girl with holes in her shoes. They see a problem, a statistic, something to be managed, not saved. She placed a photograph on the desk between them, right next to Muna's file. I dropped out at 16 because I couldn't concentrate on calculus when I didn't know if we'd have electricity that month. I got my GED at 19, worked my way through community college, transferred to NYU on loans I'm still paying off, built my first company at 28, sold it at 32, started Rivera Global at 35. You did all that yourself, Donald said. It wasn't a question. I did all that angry, Julie corrected. Angry at a system that wastes brilliance like it's renewable. Angry at a world that measures potential by zip codes. Angry at myself for not fighting harder when I was 13 and still had the chance. She walked to the window, her silhouette framed against the Manhattan skyline. Do you know what the difference between me and Muna is, Mr. Williams? Donald shook his head. Julie turned to face him, and her eyes were wet. You. The word landed like a physical blow. You show up, Julie said. You make her breakfast. You help with homework. You take pictures of her looking at butterflies because you see who she is, not who she could be. You're poor, yes. Struggling, yes. But Muna has something I never had. She has a parent who loves her enough to stay. Julie walked back to the desk and pulled out one more document. This one was different. It was a contract. I told you I wouldn't just write checks for Muna's education. I meant it, but I have a different proposal. Donald's hands were shaking as he reached for the contract. The header read, Rivera Global Community Scout Position. What is this? He asked. It's a job. $65,000 a year. Full benefits. Your role would be to do what I do. Find the invisible kids. The ones who draw circles instead of squares. The ones who ask why when everyone else just accepts. You'd work with school counselors, teachers, community centers. You'd be my eyes in neighborhoods I can't reach. Donald stared at the number. 65,000. That was more than double what he made now. That was Muna's field trips paid for. That was a winter coat that would last. That was breathing room. Why me? He asked. Because you understand both worlds. You've been invisible, so you know where to look. You've loved a brilliant child through poverty, so you know what they need. And most importantly, you haven't let the struggle kill your dignity. Donald looked up at her. And if I say no? Julie's expression softened. Then Muna's scholarship continues. I don't punish children for their parents' choices. But you'll go back to being invisible. And the next Donald Williams out there, the one cleaning someone else's office and hiding his daughter's brilliance because he's afraid of what help might cost, he'll never get found. She picked up the photograph of her younger self again. I can't save that girl, Julie said quietly. She's gone, but I can save 47 others. 48 if you help me. Donald looked at the contract, at the salary, at the title that didn't say janitor but scout, at the chance to stop being invisible not by leaving his world behind, but by bringing others with him. There's something you need to understand, Julie said, and her voice had that sharp edge again. The CEO was back. If you take this job, you'll meet parents who say no, who choose pride over possibility, who think accepting help makes them weak. And you'll have to watch their children disappear into the system, into mediocrity, into the same trap we escaped. Can you handle that? Donald thought about Muna, about the butterfly, about the way her eyes lit up when she understood something new, about the future she could have if he just let go of his fear. But before he could answer, Julie's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her entire demeanor changed. Her face went pale. "We have a situation," she said. "What kind of situation?" Julie turned her laptop toward Donald. On the screen was a news article, just published 15 minutes ago. The headline read, "Tech CEO's secret scholarship program under investigation. Allegations of child data exploitation." Donald's blood turned to ice. "Someone leaked the program," Julie said, her voice tight. "The press has gotten a hold of Project Phoenix. They're calling it surveillance. They're saying I'm using these children for some kind of social experiment." "Are you?" Donald asked. Julie's eyes flashed. "Are you seriously asking me that right now?" "I don't know." Donald stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. 5 minutes ago, I thought you were a stalker. Now you're offering me a job. Now there's a news article saying you're exploiting kids. How am I supposed to know it's real?" Julie closed the laptop slowly. "You're supposed to look at the results. 47 children who were failing in public schools are now thriving in specialized programs. 47 families who were one emergency away from financial collapse now have stability. 47 futures that weren't supposed to exist. But the article is from Victor Hastings," Julie interrupted. "My former partner. We started our first company together. I bought him out when I discovered he was embezzling. He spent the last 3 years trying to destroy everything I build." She walked to the window again, her shoulders tight with tension. "He's right about one thing, though. I did collect data on children without their parents' explicit consent. I did create algorithms to track vulnerable populations. I did make decisions about their futures without their knowledge, and now I'm going to pay for it." Donald felt like he was drowning. This morning, his biggest concern was whether he could afford Muna's field trip. Now he was standing in the middle of a billionaire scandal that could destroy everything. "What happens to Muna?" he asked quietly. Julie turned, and the look on her face was something Donald had never seen before. Not fear, not anger, something worse. Defeat. "If this investigation shuts down Project Phoenix," Julie said, "all the scholarships end. Not immediately, but within the year. The foundation will be dissolved. The funding will disappear. And 47 children will go back to schools that can't help them, to futures that don't exist." She sat down at her desk, suddenly looking every one of her 47 years. "Unless," she said. "Unless what?" Julie looked at him with an expression that was pure calculation. "Unless we go public first. Unless we tell our story before Victor tells his. Unless a father stands up and says, 'This billionaire didn't exploit my daughter. She saved her.' And there it was. The real reason for this meeting. The real reason Julie had left her door open. She didn't just want Donald to find the photograph. She needed him to. "You want me to be your spokesperson," Donald realized. "I want you to tell the truth," Julie corrected, "about what poverty does to brilliant children, about what it takes to break that cycle, about whether pride is worth more than your daughter's future." She pushed the contract across the desk again. "The press conference is in 2 hours. Channel 5. They'll ask about Project Phoenix, about the children, about whether this is help or exploitation. I can show them data and statistics and success rates, or I can show them you, a father who found a photograph and demanded answers. A father who learned that sometimes the most dangerous thing we can do is nothing." Donald looked at the contract, at the salary that could change everything, at the title that made him visible, at the chance to help others the way Julie had helped him. But he also looked at the photograph of young Julie, at the dead eyes of a girl who'd been too brilliant for her circumstances, at the warning of what happened when genius met poverty and no one intervened. "If I do this," Donald said slowly, "I need to know one thing." "What?" "Do you actually care about these kids? Or are they just a way for you to feel better about the girl you used to be?" Julie stood up, walked around the desk, stood directly in front of Donald, close enough that he could see the lines around her eyes, the exhaustion, the weight of carrying 47 futures on her shoulders. "I care about them because I am them," she said. "Every single day, I look at these photographs and I see the girl I was, the girl I could have stayed, the girl who died so this woman could exist. And I ask myself, was it worth it? Did I have to sacrifice my childhood, my relationships, my ability to trust anyone just to survive?" Her voice broke slightly. "And the only way I can live with the answer is by making sure they don't have to." She extended her hand, not as a CEO, not as a billionaire, but as a human being who'd been where Donald's daughter was, who'd survived the impossible, who'd turned pain into purpose. "So, what's it going to be, Mr. Williams? Do we save them together, or do we watch them disappear?" Donald stared at her hand, at the contract, at the photograph of Muna looking at a butterfly, and then the door to the office opened. A security guard stood there, out of breath. "Ms. Rivera, you need to see this. Now!" He held up his phone. On the screen was a live news broadcast. The banner read, "Breaking. Child Protective Services opens investigation into Project Phoenix families." Donald's vision tunneled, because if CPS was investigating, that meant they'd be coming for Muna. They'd question her, question him, question whether a man making $32,000 was fit to raise a genius daughter when a billionaire was secretly funding her education. They'd look at his tiny apartment, his second-hand furniture, his calculations about milk and bus fares, and they'd decide that Donald William Janitor couldn't possibly provide what Muna needed. They'd take her away. Julie grabbed the remote and turned on the television mounted on her wall. Every channel was carrying the same story. Reporters outside Rivera Global, parents being interviewed, experts discussing the ethics of unsolicited intervention in vulnerable communities. And then Victor Hastings appeared on screen, suit perfectly tailored, smile perfectly practiced, lies perfectly delivered. "Julie Rivera calls this charity." Victor said into the camera, "I call it colonialism. She's targeting poor families, collecting data on their children, making decisions about their futures without consent. This isn't help. It's exploitation dressed up as altruism." The reporter asked, "What do you think should happen to these children?" Victor's expression turned grave. "I think they should be protected from people who see them as projects instead of people, from systems that prioritize results over relationships. These families deserve agency, not rescue." Donald felt sick, because Victor was right. Julie had made decisions about Muna without asking, had collected data, had intervened in their lives like they were problems to be solved rather than people to be respected. But he was also wrong, because Muna was thriving, because the Phoenix Initiative had given her a future that Donald couldn't have provided alone. The truth wasn't simple. It never was. Julie turned off the television. Her hand was shaking. "I'm going to lose everything," she whispered. "The company, the foundation, my reputation, everything I built to prove that I was worth more than where I came from." She looked at Donald, And 47 children are going to pay the price for my hubris. For the first time since Donald had met her, Julie Rivera looked small. Donald thought about Muna, about the field trip he'd been trying to afford, about the winter coat, about the future that hung in the balance. He thought about the other children on the wall, about their parents who didn't know, about the choices that had been made for them. He thought about pride and poverty and the impossible space between help and control. And then he picked up the phone on Julie's desk. "What are you doing?" Julie asked. Donald dialed a number he knew by heart. "Channel 5 News Desk. This is Melissa." "My name is Donald Williams," he said, his voice steady. "I'm a janitor at Rivera Global. My daughter is part Project Phoenix. And I have a story you're going to want to hear." Julie's eyes went wide. "But first," Donald said into the phone, "you're going to need to send your cameras to Julie Rivera's office, because in exactly 1 hour, we're going to settle this. All of it. Together." He hung up. Julie stared at him. "What are you doing?" Donald picked up the contract. He didn't sign it. "Not yet. I'm choosing visibility," he said, "for better or worse. Because you're right about one thing. Poverty is a cage, but so is secrets. And if we're going to save these kids, we're going to do it honestly." He looked at the wall of photographs, at the 47 faces that deserve better than being someone's secret project, better than being someone's shame. "So here's what's going to happen," Donald said. "We're going to go on camera. You're going to apologize for the secrecy. I'm going to defend the results. We're going to invite every parent into this room and show them these photographs and let them decide together what happens next. And if they say no," Julie asked, "if they reject the help?" Donald met her eyes. "Then we respect that, because that's what you should have done from the beginning." The press conference happened exactly 1 hour later. Channel 5 came. So did Channel 7, Channel 2, and a dozen online outlets. By the time Julie and Donald walked into the conference room on the 14th floor, there were 43 cameras pointed at them. But more importantly, there were 21 parents. 21 mothers and fathers who received calls from their children's schools about Project Phoenix, who'd learned that their kids were part of a secret program, who'd come demanding answers. Donald recognized 2 of them, Mrs. Chun from Flushing, Mr. Okonkwo from the Bronx. Their children's photographs hung on Julie's wall next to Muna's. Julie stood at the podium. She'd changed out of the red power suit into something simpler, a black blouse, gray slacks. She looked human. "My name is Julie Rivera," she began. Her voice was steady, but Donald could see her hands trembling. "And I owe all of you an apology." The room went silent. 6 years ago, I started Project Phoenix with the best of intentions. I wanted to find children like I had been, brilliant, overlooked, trapped in systems that weren't designed to help them. I created algorithms to identify these children. I funded scholarships anonymously. I intervened in their educational paths without asking permission from their families. A reporter raised her hand. "Ms. Rivera, are you admitting to legal surveillance?" "I'm admitting to arrogance," Julie corrected. "I believe that because I had succeeded despite my circumstances, I had the right to make decisions for others. I collected data. I analyzed patterns. I decided which children deserved help and which didn't. And I did it all in secret because I was afraid that if I asked permission, parents would say no." Mrs. Chun stood up. She was a small woman, but her voice carried. "My son, Marcus, has been at the Archer Academy for 3 years. You're telling me you put him there? Without asking me?" "Yes," Julie said simply. "Why?" Julie took a breath. Because Marcus scored in the 99th percentile on every standardized test. Because his teachers reported that he was teaching himself calculus from library books. Because he was being bullied in his public school for being too smart. And because when I ran his profile through my algorithm, every indicator suggested that without intervention, he would drop out by age 16, just like I did. So you decided you knew better than me what my son needed? Mrs. Chen's voice was rising. Yes. Julie didn't look away, and I was wrong to do it that way. But I was right about Marcus. He's thriving, and you know that because you've seen the change in him. Mrs. Chen opened her mouth, closed it, sat down. Mr. Okonkwo stood next. My daughter Amara is 10. She wants to be an engineer. You're telling me her scholarship isn't real? That it's some billionaire's pet project? The scholarship is real, Julie said. The funding is permanent. The opportunity is legitimate. What wasn't real was the choice. I should have asked you first. Why didn't you? This time, Donald stepped forward. Because he would have said no, Donald said, just like I would have. Because we've been taught that accepting help is weakness, that struggling alone is noble, that we should be ashamed we can't provide everything our children need. He looked at Mr. Okonkwo directly. I'm a janitor. I make $32,000 a year. My daughter Muna is one of the smartest people I've ever met, and I can't afford to give her the education she deserves. That's not a moral failing. That's a system failing. And Julie Rivera, for all her faults, recognized that. Donald turned to face the cameras. My name is Donald Williams. 2 hours ago, I found a photograph of my daughter in Ms. Rivera's office. A photograph I took 3 years ago. A private moment I never shared. And I was furious. I thought she was stalking Muna. I thought she had some creepy obsession. He paused. But then she showed me 46 other children. 46 other families. 46 other parents who were doing exactly what I was doing, trying to hold genius together with minimum wage and hope. A reporter called out, Mr. Williams, are you saying you support Project Phoenix? I'm saying I support my daughter getting the education she deserves. I'm saying that if we have to choose between pride and possibility, we're asking the wrong question. The real question is, why do we live in a country where brilliant children need secret billionaires to save them? The room erupted. Questions flew. Cameras flashed. But Donald kept talking. Julie Rivera made mistakes. Big ones. She should have been transparent. She should have asked permission. She should have treated us like partners instead of problems to solve. But you know what she did that no one else did? She showed up. She saw children the system had already written off, and she refused to accept that. He turned to Julie, and now she's going to fix this. The right way, with transparency, with consent, with partnership. Julie nodded. She pulled out a stack of papers. Every family here today is receiving a complete file on their child's participation in Project Phoenix. Every algorithm, every decision point, every dollar spent. You'll have 60 days to review everything. After that, you'll have a choice. Continue the program under a new structure that includes parental oversight, or withdraw completely with no penalties. What about the data you collected? A reporter asked. Delete it, Julie said, within 72 hours. The only information we'll retain is what families explicitly consent to. What about the investigation? Another called out. I'm cooperating fully. If I broke laws, I'll face the consequences. But I want to be clear, this program saved lives. Not in some abstract way. Literally, Amara Okonkwo was failing fourth grade before Project Phoenix. Now she's designing robots. Marcus Chin was being recruited by gangs in his neighborhood. Now he's being recruited by MIT. She looked directly at the camera. Victor Hastings calls this exploitation. I call it emergency intervention. Because when a system is designed to fail children, waiting for permission means watching them disappear. Mrs. Chin stood again. This time, her voice was different, softer. My son loved that school, she said. He comes home talking about things I don't understand. Physics, engineering, future. He has friends who don't make fun of him, teachers who see him. Hope. She looked at Julie. You should have asked me. I'm his mother. I deserve to know. You're absolutely right, Julie said. But if you had asked me 3 years ago, when we were living in shelter and I was working 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, I would have said no, because I was drowning. And drowning people don't make good decisions about the future. They just try to survive today. Her voice broke. So I'm angry you didn't ask. But I'm grateful you didn't listen to the answer I would have given. One by one, the other parents started talking. Some angry, some grateful, some confused, all of them honest. And slowly, a picture emerged. Project Phoenix wasn't perfect. It wasn't even particularly ethical in its original form. But it had done something that the government, the schools, and the system had failed to do. It had seen these children as valuable, not as statistics, not as poverty metrics, not as test scores or zip codes, as human beings whose potential was being wasted. So what happens now? Mr. Okonkwo asked. Julie looked at Donald. Donald looked at the parents. The parents looked at their children's futures. Now, Julie said, we build this the right way. Together, I'll provide funding. You'll provide oversight. We'll create a board of parents who approve every decision. We'll make this transparent, accountable, and consensual. And if we say no, someone asked, then I'll respect that, Julie said. But I'll also start a new program. One that works with families from the beginning, because this problem, brilliant children being abandoned by broken systems, it doesn't go away just because we stop looking at it. Donald stepped forward again. She's offered me a job, community scout. My role would be to find other families like ours, to build trust, to ask permission before intervening, to be the bridge between the world that needs help and the world that can provide it. He pulled out the contract Julie had given him earlier. I'm going to take it, not because I trust her completely, but because I trust Muna's future more than I trust my pride. And because if there's one thing I've learned today, it's that poverty loves secrets. It thrives in the darkness. The only way to fight it is to drag everything into the light. He signed the contract right there, in front of the cameras, in front of the parents, in front of the world. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. A janitor and a billionaire, a father and a former genius child, a man who'd been invisible and a woman who'd built an empire just to be seen. Together, the press conference lasted 3 more hours. Questions were answered. Promises were made, oversight structures were proposed, and by the end of it, something unexpected happened. The parents didn't leave angry. They left empowered, because for the first time, they weren't begging for help. They were demanding partnership. Project Phoenix didn't end that day. It transformed. The investigation continued, but the narrative had shifted. This wasn't a story about exploitation. It was a story about broken systems and the desperate measures people take to fix them. 3 months later, the charges were dropped. Julie paid a fine for data privacy violations. Project Phoenix became Phoenix Partnership, with a parent board that had veto power over every major decision. Enrollment doubled. 6 months after the press conference, Donald stood in Muna's robotics lab at the Archer Academy. His daughter was surrounded by circuits and code, building something she called a predictive learning algorithm that Donald couldn't begin to understand. But he didn't need to understand it. He just needed to see her face. The same face from the butterfly photograph. The same wonder. The same brilliance. But now, instead of hiding it, she was free to let it shine. "Dad, look." Muna called. "I got it to recognize patterns in historical data. It can predict student dropout rates based on early indicators." Donald walked over. "What kind of indicators?" "Attendance, grades, but also stuff like lunch program participation and library checkouts. The things that show engagement, not just achievement." It took Donald a moment to realize what she was describing. She was building a more ethical version of Julie's original algorithm, one that prioritized intervention over surveillance. "That's brilliant, sweetheart. Ms. Rivera helped me design it." Muna said proudly. She said that just because something can be automated doesn't mean it should be. That technology should support human decisions, not replace them. Donald smiled. Julie had been true to her word. She didn't just fund Muna's education. She mentored her, taught her not just science, but ethics, not just how to build systems, but how to build them responsibly. "How's the new job?" Muna asked. "Good. Found 3 more kids this week. One in Queens who's teaching herself astrophysics from YouTube. One in the Bronx who's writing novels in 3 languages. One in Brooklyn who built a water filtration system from parts he found in a junkyard." "Did their parents say yes?" "2 did. 1 didn't." Muna's expression fell. "What happens to that kid?" "We respect the decision, but we leave the door open. Sometimes people need time to trust, especially when they've been let down before." Donald had learned that lesson the hard way. In 6 months, he'd approached 47 families. 28 had said yes immediately. 12 had said yes after thinking about it. 7 had said no. Those 7 haunted him because he saw their children's potential, saw the spark that would die if left untended, but he also saw their parents' fear. The legitimate, earned fear systems that promised help and delivered judgment. He couldn't force them. He could only offer. That was a lesson Julie had learned too late, that he'd learned just in time. Help without consent is control, no matter how benevolent the intention. His phone buzzed. A text from Julie. "Board meeting in 20 minutes. You're presenting the quarterly report." Donald kissed Muna on the head. "Gotta go. I'm proud of you." "I know," she said with the casual confidence of a child who never doubted she was loved. "I'm proud of you, too." The Phoenix Partnership offices were on the 38th floor of Rivera Global. The boardroom was nothing like Julie's private office. It was accessible, transparent. The walls were glass. Inside were 8 parents, 2 teachers, 3 community leaders, Julie and Donald. Donald laid out his report. 47 families contacted, 40 enrolled in enhanced educational programs, 23 receiving additional support services like tutoring, counseling, and college prep. What about the families who declined? Mrs. Chun asked. She was the board chair now. "We maintain contact through community partnerships," Donald explained. "Non-invasive. We make sure they know the opportunity remains open if circumstances change." "Has anyone come back?" Mr. Alconquo asked. 2 families, both after seeing the progress other children made. They reached out to us. That was the key. Let the results speak. Don't push. Create environments where success is visible and accessible. Julie presented the financial report. The foundation was sustainable. In fact, with the positive press from the Transparency Initiative, donations had increased. Other philanthropists were contributing. The model was scaling. I've been contacted by 3 other cities, Julie said. Chicago, Detroit, and Oakland. They want to replicate the program. Are you going to do it? A teacher asked. Only if local parents lead it. I'll provide funding and infrastructure, but governance stays local. The mistakes I made in New York can't be repeated. The meeting continued for an hour. Plans were made. Budgets were approved. Oversight was maintained. This was what partnership looked like. Messy, complicated, sometimes inefficient, but ultimately more effective because it was built on trust rather than imposed from above. After the meeting, Donald and Julie stood in the original office where this had all started. The wall of photographs had grown. There were now 93 children, and next to each child's photo was a smaller frame containing a picture of their parent. Partnership, not rescue. Do you ever regret it? Donald asked, going public, losing control. Julie considered the question carefully. I regret the pain I caused by not being transparent from the beginning. I regret the families who felt violated by my actions. I regret that Victor was able to use my mistakes as a weapon. She touched one of the photographs. A girl named Yasmin, who was now studying bioengineering at Columbia on a full scholarship. But I don't regret fighting. And I don't regret that now, instead of me making decisions alone in this office, we're making them together. Because that's what was missing when I was 13. Not money, not opportunity. Partnership. Someone who saw me as a whole person, not just a problem to solve. Donald understood that deeply, because he'd almost made the same mistake from the other direction. He'd almost refused help out of pride, almost kept Muna small to keep her safe. My mother used to say something, Donald said quietly. She'd tell me, "Baby, poverty is a cage that locks from the outside, but dignity is a key that only works from the inside." What does that mean? Julie asked. It means we can't wait for systems to fix themselves. We have to demand better. But we also can't let others decide what better looks like for us. Real help requires both sides to show up honestly. Julie nodded slowly. Your mother sounds wise. She died before Muna was born. I wish she could have met her. I think she'd be proud of both of you. They stood in silence for a moment, looking at the wall of faces. 93 children who might have disappeared into statistics. 93 families who'd chosen to risk trust. 93 futures that were still being written. Thank you, Julie said suddenly. For what? For signing that contract when you didn't have to. For standing with me at the press conference. For believing that I could be better than my mistakes. Donald smiled. Thank you for seeing Muna. For refusing to let her brilliance be wasted. For being arrogant enough to try and humble enough to change. Julie laughed. It was the first time Donald had heard her really laugh. It made her seem younger, more like the girl in the photograph, but happier. We should add your mother's saying to the Foundation's mission statement. Julie said, poverty is a cage that locks on the outside, but dignity is a key that only works from the inside. She'd like that. Donald's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from a school counselor in Harlem. There was a student, 6th grade, teaching himself coding, living in a shelter. The counselor thought he might be a good fit for Phoenix Partnership, but she wanted Donald to meet the family first. Build trust. Ask permission. The right way. I have to go, Donald said. Another spark? Maybe. I'll know once I talk to the parents. Julie walked him to the elevator. As the doors opened, she said, Donald, the goal isn't to save every child. The goal is to prove that every child is worth saving. The system will follow once we change the narrative. Donald stepped into the elevator. As the doors began to close, he called back, One more thing. The boy I'm meeting today. His name is Jerome, and his mother's name is Clara. Julie's eyes widened. Like your wife. Like my wife. So I'm going to show up for Jerome the way I wish someone had shown up for her. Not with money. Not with programs. With presence. With a message that his family matters. That his dreams matter. That he matters. The doors closed. Donald rode down to the lobby. Past the floors he used to clean. Past the offices where he'd been invisible. But he wasn't invisible anymore. He was visible by choice. By purpose. And in his pocket was a list of 47 names. 47 children he hadn't found yet. 47 families he hadn't met. 47 chances to get it right. Because that's what he'd learned from Julie. From Muna. From this entire impossible journey. A candle doesn't lose its light by lighting another. It simply makes the room brighter for everyone. Talent isn't a luxury for privileged. It's a human right that poverty tries to steal. And the only way to fight that theft is to show up, again and again, with humility, with partnership, with the understanding that help without consent is control, but support with dignity is liberation. Donald walked out into the New York evening. The city stretched before him, millions of stories unfolding simultaneously, some tragic, some hopeful, most invisible to everyone except those living them. His job was to make them visible. Not all of them. That was impossible. But enough of them. Enough to prove that brilliance exists everywhere. That potential isn't determined by zip code. That a janitor's daughter can change the world if someone just gives her the chance. And that someone doesn't have to be a billionaire. It can be anyone willing to see, anyone willing to ask, anyone willing to stand beside instead of above. Donald pulled out his phone and texted Jerome's mother. My name is Donald Williams. I work with Phoenix Partnership. I've heard about your son. I'd love to meet your family. Not to offer anything, just to listen. Would Saturday morning work? He hit send. The message sat there for a moment, unread, and then 3 dots appeared. Clara typing. The future responding. So here's the real question. Did you subscribe yet? Thousands of people will listen to this story and won't subscribe. Please don't be that person. Kindly support what I do here by subscribing. And then drop in the comments section your thoughts on Donald and Julie's journey. What other families should Phoenix Partnership help? What challenges will they face as they scale this model? Let me know what you think. This story teaches that poverty is a systemic barrier, not a personal failure. It demonstrates that help without consent is control. Even well-intentioned intervention must respect autonomy and dignity. Transparency builds trust. Secrets, even benevolent ones, undermine the foundation of genuine partnership. Pride versus possibility is a false choice. The real question is why systems fail children, not whether families should accept help. Talent is universal. Opportunity is not. Brilliance exists in every community, but access to resources doesn't. Partnership over charity. Sustainable change requires collaboration between those with resources and those with lived experience. Visibility is liberation. Marginalized communities thrive when seen as partners, not problems to solve. The core lesson: a candle doesn't lose its light by lighting another. It simply makes the room brighter for everyone. True philanthropy elevates rather than controls, partners rather than rescues, and treats human potential as a right rather than a privilege.